I said, आप क्रांतिकारी हैं क्या? तो he said, क्यों नहीं? मैं बंदूक नहीं रखता हूँ तो क्या हुआ? But I see myself as a revolutionary. And the Tikri border one was extremely disciplined and very, very focused protest. And the interesting thing was that culture becomes not a frivolous add-on that you do in order to entertain the crowd while the leaders are giving speeches. But culture is a central organizational principle of the left in Punjab. A straightforward or a very comfortable narrative is not necessarily the best way of telling a complicated story. And particularly when it comes to telling stories that are political, in a sense, then you don't want to actually smoothing it into a conventional narrative, giving people characters to hold on to and emotional arcs and all the ways in which filmmakers, you actually want to disturb that.
I was watching this on the big screen after a long gap. It's like, so this is after 11 years after the film was being made. I remember the first time I saw it in Kolkata was probably in one of our festivals, and then followed by that in Presidency College. That must have been 2014 or 15, right? And then we get to see it. It's a different effect to see it on the big screen. So, well, thank you for making this film. I want to come straight away to the Q&A, and I'd like to open with some questions from my side, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Can we have some more audience lights, please, because so that we can see everyone? So, coming to the structure of the film, and from what I've read and what I've spoken to you before, this began with you getting a chance to film the comrades in Bastar in the jungles, and then after that this film took a long time to be made, and there was a long period of edit and you shooting the parts, the segments of Punjab and the segments of Orissa. So can you just take us through that chronology once again so that we can set the tone for the conversation?
Yeah, so the film began in 2010 with an opportunity which was not thrown open to me. It was thrown open to my friend and comrade Arundhati, who the comrades had invited to the forest, and I sort of attached myself to that exercise. So it was very intense few weeks traveling with them. There were just the two of us, and I had a small camcorder. And sort of the ground rules were that I could shoot whatever I could shoot, but that it wasn't a trip for me to shoot. So I shot everything that I could. And then I was supposed to go back 8 or 9 months later. And in those intervening months, the situation in Bastar changed quite dramatically. I think the kind of openness that the comrades were testing in terms of allowing journalists and others to come in periodically, I think it had been counterproductive for them, and they had begun to pay a very heavy price for that. So to cut a long story short, I traveled all the way to some strange point which had been fixed 10 months earlier, and nobody came to receive me. So
The next trip.
Yes. So there I was with this material shot over a few weeks, and a material of a certain kind. A film could have been made out of it, but I suddenly realized that the whole idea of going back was to make a slightly more expansive investigation of that idea of, I was not simply interested in them as guerrillas in the forest, and the material I had was a little bit like guerrillas in the forest, So once again, I work very closely in collaboration with my editor, Tarun Bhartiya, and we started examining our own reasons, like why is it that we wanted to make that film? And the thing was that at that time, and as I was watching the film today, I sometimes wonder whether that was the right set of preoccupations to have, but we were very intrigued by this idea of is it possible to call yourself a revolutionary in these times? And who are these people who call themselves revolutionaries? So I had been traveling in Orissa for many, many years and knew that ground a little bit. So I knew Lingaraj Azad, who's in the film, and he had always been, I was always very interested in him, because a long time ago I had a conversation with him when I asked him this. I said, "आप क्रांतिकारी हैं क्या?" तो he said, "क्यों नहीं? मैं बंदूक नहीं रखता हूँ तो क्या हुआ?" But I see myself as a revolutionary. So I began a little bit of shooting in Niyamgiri around that. And Punjab has been an old preoccupation of mine. I had done some work in the late 80s in Punjab, incredibly, with Doordarshan money. And I knew some of the comrades there. And this is quite interesting, because I was actually interested in Pash. So in Amritsar, I met a professor of literature who's now a friend, and asked him, I said, what impact did Naxalbari have on Punjab? And he said, culture. What the impress it left was on culture. And so he sent me off to that March 23rd event where they celebrate, the twin anniversary of the killing of Pash and of Bhagat Singh. And it didn't stay with the poetry of Pash. I realized something else was happening. At that time, what you see as the Lok Sabhyachar Manch, it was an offshoot of what we now recognize as the BKU Graha, So it was part of a much larger movement, which was kind of reimagining itself through culture and through figures like Bhagat Singh. So almost on a whim, I said we have to kind of bring it into the narrative, even if it's not totally clear to everybody what it's doing there in the film.
Yeah, taking a cue from that, I think it has made its comeback, right? So I think you have also visited the sites of the Tikri border when the farmers were protesting, and so when suddenly the farmers' protests began, and people here, they were trying to understand that what it is in them that is keeping them so focused and so sharply on the political point, and the line was very sharp. The political line was very sharp. They had even celebrated one of those days with the martyrs, which created a lot of debate and all. So Graha in particular, and also the left participation, I think it was also the CPIML ND was there, then some other factions of the CPIML who were very much a core of the farmers movement. So they made a comeback after so many years and they led this movement. And also, not to compare with it, but we also saw images of Bhagat Singh being re-invoked by these unemployed youth who protested in the parliament, and they also threw those handbills, part of which is in the cultural play that you shot. So definitely something is stirring in Punjab, and it seems to us that it's not something that has happened overnight. It must have taken a long period of incubation, which perhaps this earlier film. So how do you make that connection? Because are these people, what are they doing now? What is the connection?
At that time, it was just something very interesting. The vitality of those events, the fact that even if it was perhaps one school, but that schoolgirls were singing a song, they were learning a song about police encounters. It was all for me quite something very curious, that what are they trying, what is being recovered over here, And I think by luck or instinct or something, we were drawn to the right thing, because I would argue that in the construction of the space that was created by the farmers' movement, and for those who are not very familiar, the very long protests by farmers outside the gates of Delhi was actually, there were two protests. And the one was on Tikri border, and there's a second one. Also, the division was basically, it was the left versus the others. And the Tikri border one was extremely disciplined and very, very focused protest. And the interesting thing was that culture becomes not a frivolous add-on that you do in order to entertain the crowd while the leaders are giving speeches. But culture is a central organizational principle of the left in Punjab. So the Lok Sabha Manch is a very, very serious entity in that politics. So someone like Amolak Singh, who speaks several times in the film and who reads Pasha's poetry, is a very important figure, because the farmers movement, the BKU, and particularly the BKU Ugraha, has understood the place, and I think that's the reason why it's important to talk about it here, the place of culture in revitalizing, constructing. I'll give you a small instance. I went and showed this film in Kashmir, in the town of Shupian. Some friends had organized a screening. And it was very interesting because one of the young people there was a very, how shall I say, visually orthodox looking guy. He was wearing a black salwar kameez and he had this big beard. And he said, from your film, I take away that our resistance failed to use culture. And that when you have to fight, because wherever I see these Adivasis in Bastar, they use culture. I see in Punjab they use culture. I see in Niyamgiri they use culture, which was actually one of my intentions. I mean, people read this film or speak about it as a film about the Maoist rebellion, or I don't think it's that film. I think it's a film that is trying to actually understand what we might call the revolutionary impulse, but it's looking at the way in which culture articulates. And in each instance, it's done in very different ways.
In fact, in one of your interviews with the rebels in Bastar, they say, like two of them say that they have first joined the cultural front, and that resonated with them. And only at a later stage they became...
So it's it's very fluid over there. You might meet someone who's got a dafli and who sings, and if you chat to them about what they've been doing, he might have been until a few months ago part of the PLGA, and vice versa. That somebody who's sort of, there are no, these are not seen as separate things. Culture is part of the fight, and the fight is part of culture. Right. I think there's something very important to be drawn.
Yeah, especially here. And before I open it up to the audience, to draw parallels from your earlier films also, I think one very special thing about your films is that you take great pains to film the counter-insurgency, and not very often we see that. Of course, there might be access issues and all, and how to get to that. But when you just plain and simple document the counter-insurgency, whether it is in Kashmir, whether it is here, it sort of, even the visuals speak for themselves, and it has a very important effect on the audience in seeing, like when you talk about the real war and the perfect war, and some people are preparing for the ideal war, but the reality is very different, and they might not really know the terrain, they might not know the people. So tell us a little bit about this filming of counter-insurgency and how you take it.
So I think one has to understand that it is always going to be an unequal access, because the power, the powerful are never going to let you access their world, as opposed to the powerless, who might actually welcome you, because you are willing to listen to them. So you have to find, where am I going to get a chink through which I can shine a light. When I made a film in Kashmir, I said to the military, I said, I want to shoot you doing your good work.
Sadbhavna.
Yeah, which is this they have this army as a Sadbhavna project. So I said, just show me whatever you're doing, just allow me to go there. So they gave us permission to shoot a place at an army camp where a young captain is dishing out transistors to villagers. On the face of it, that's what it is. But when you walk into a space like this, you can recognize it for what it is. Not only is it performative, but how much fear and uneasiness it is. So then the skill is in reading into that what is before you, and in invoking the unease, the anxiety, the fear that the presence of the military. So in the same way in Bastar, the jungle warfare school and the brigadier who headed it, they were quite enthusiastic about publicity, which is what I suppose they thought we were going to do. So then it's up to us to find a way of entering that space, shooting that pageantry, shooting those slithering down, those fake helicopters, shouting commando, commando, and then putting it into some kind of a context where it has a meaning. I must add that the brigadier saw the film and he was not unhappy with it, because he thinks he comes off,
Doing his job well.
he's doing his job well. So that is my failure, but
You did your job well.
so yeah, so I can't make this claim that I'm able to, in any exhaustive way, enter both worlds. But I think it is sometimes possible to, in the case of an earlier film in the Narmada Valley, we couldn't really access, the funders, the World Bank. So then what do? Then you go to Gujarat and you go to the water parks. And just those images that while a dam is being built, people are being dislocated for water, for Kutch and Saurashtra, for drinking water. But actually people are, pardon the expression, they're pissing away the water. So then it's just a question of finding a kind of space which you can illuminate.
Right. So let's open it up to the audience for, we will take only 2 questions because we are running a little short of time. So, and let me also tell you that I just read a few days back that Mr. Chidambaram is now writing on affluent Indians. So he's maybe had a change.
He's currently speaking truth to power.
Yeah, he's become Comrade Chidambaram. Anyway, so let's open it up to the audience.
While doing this film, actually, if you have some untold story which you cannot film or you can show it, can you tell us if it is there?
I think that all the stories that needed to be told have been told in the film, and maybe if I had 2 drinks and I was sitting over dinner with you, I might have told you a few more. But for now, I think I'll stick with what's in the film.
What is the purpose with which you started making this film? What is it that you wanted to convey through this film to your larger audience? And the second is, can a documentary have a narrative? Because while I was going through the documentary, the film that you made, perhaps there was a lack of continuity, although the substance was very good. Thank you.
So I spoke a little bit about it a little earlier, about what prompted the film. Just tell me the phrase you used.
He said structure and continuity.
No,
the first one, the purpose.
Yeah. So I think that, and this has been a subject of some discussion over the last few days, that I don't think films don't have to have a purpose. Films very often begin as questions that we have about the world around us. So, in the case of Deepa Dhanraj's film on the Hyderabad riots, it began with her seeing these processions, these Ganesh processions, and saying, what is this? And eventually it becomes a film about the construction of a communal consciousness, and so on. So, in our case, it was a long-standing, a niggle about, so how can anybody call themselves a revolutionary these days? I'm not talking about the parliamentary parties which have revolutionary in their titles, not about those. But there we had, me and Tarun, my editor, both of us had met people who see themselves as क्रांतिकारीs. So वो कौन है वो क्रांतिकारी? आज के दिन में किसका हक बनता है अपने आप को क्रांतिकारी बोलने का? You know? So those were the questions. So that, I don't know if that's a purpose, but that was the ख्वाहिश, that to try and understand that. As far as structure is concerned, I think I spoke about it yesterday or day before, that I think that I have begun to believe that a straightforward or a very comfortable narrative is not necessarily the best way of telling a complicated story. And particularly when it comes to telling stories that are political in a sense, then you don't want to actually smoothening it into a conventional narrative, giving people characters to hold on to and emotional arcs and all the ways in which filmmakers, you actually want to disturb that. You actually, just when they are getting too comfortable with one, just when you think this is a film about the Maoists in Bastar, I want to break it and take you somewhere else, So it's not that it doesn't have a structure. It has an uncomfortable structure or an unfamiliar structure. Does it work? I can't always guarantee that. People can read it in a fragmentary way, but I have no problem with that. I'm not uncomfortable if the whole thing doesn't neatly fall into place for people. I would be actually uncomfortable with that. Because when something falls, that's what I call the BBC documentary, where in the first 15 minutes you know how it's going to end, and it's very polished and it's very sophisticated and all that. But I would much rather that you and whoever has come to watch the film with you, when you step out arguing about the film. In some senses, the discomfort about it. The idea is not to, not to caress you or to reassure you, but of bringing about a certain kind of discomfort with your existing understanding of this terrain, but to do it in a skillful, in a way that you may not even notice how uncomfortable, what has made you uncomfortable, except that you go away uncomfortable.
Thank you.
There's a last question over there, and that's the last one. It's overtime. Okay. So they're not allowing. So maybe you can ask your question outside. Just I wanted to add that continue what you responded to him. I think the usage of those quotations and the way you break it up, like that. I think you deliberately do that. Like you do the sound design in that way. You just break up the text that way. So I think it's a skill that we need to look at this film again.
So as I grow older, I'm becoming a little more polite when I stand and defend my films. But when I was younger, when somebody said pointed out something and said, "Did you do that deliberately?" It was one of the things that made me blow a fuse, which was like, of course I did it deliberately. Everything is deliberate in a film, every nanosecond, every type, and whatever. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you so much, and we have a lot more to talk about. Let's give him a big hand. Thank you.